My name is McConico, and I am the author of a book called Fixing Broken. Fixing Broken is about my life and the devastation that I felt after my parents divorced. When I was 8 years old, my dad and my mom divorced, and I was very much a daddy's girl. I was attached to him at the hip. So wherever he went, I went. I was in his truck whenever it started. So when they split, it was really hard for me to get used to the idea of my dad not being in my life every day. We came from a family where we really didn't share a lot of our emotions and our feelings publicly. And so I had a hard time being able to express myself in our family setting. It certainly wasn't something that we talked about at school or outside of the home. And so for the most part, I really just cried myself to sleep at night. When I began to develop and kind of grow more into my teen years, I was still missing his presence in my life. And what I was really missing was his validation. I was missing his affection and his love. And so for a long time, I sought that through promiscuity. I sought it through needing approval from people and always having this desire to need to please. Really what I was looking for was my dad. And I had these holes in the whole of my being. As I began to enter into my young adult years, what I discovered was I was filling that hole with all kinds of things that really weren't filling at all. I found myself in a domestic violence relationship very early on in my college years. I ended up having a child with my abuser, and I was in a world that I had never known before. So I'm trying to fill the hole of my dad's absence, and instead I'm being broken even further. After several bouts of arguing and fighting and abuse, I decided that I was going to leave. I was in the middle of Omaha, Nebraska with my young son. It was winter time, and I was able to get away on a weekend that he wasn't home. I went and lived with a friend of mine that I had met while I was in Omaha, and I found refuge there. What I discovered was the hurt that I had from my dad was now compounded with the hurt that I'm experiencing from my abuser. So I'm not only dealing with the absence of my father, I'm also dealing with this domestic violence that I've subjected myself to. So after I was able to really kind of get in a position where I'm not in the home with the abuser any longer, I was still searching. I was looking for that love that I needed from my father. I was looking for that piece of my life to be whole again. And so I was able to get out of the domestic violence relationship, but then it led me to a relationship with a guy who was a drug addict. And so I became a drug addict, right? God tells us all the time that we become like the companions we keep. And for me, I was just looking for love. I was looking for the hole to be filled that I had missed with my dad. And so I moved from one situation to another. I was addicted to drugs for probably 4 to 5 years of my life. And I found that no matter what I did, I still had this brokenness from my father. I was able to move forward a little bit. I was able to kind of get stable, and I was able to break free from the relationship with the drug addict, but I had this addiction now. After I was able to find some steady employment, what I discovered was I had a repetition of broken things in my life. I can't keep a job. I can't keep an apartment. I can't keep good friendships. I can't keep connections with people who I need to be connected with. And I knew that what I really needed was to be whole and healed on the inside, but I didn't know how. How was I really going to capture that healing? How was I really going to come to a place of wholeness? And I knew for once in my life that it wasn't going to be through a man. I remember in my apartment, there was a time when my utilities got turned off. So typically my routine was I have a guy, he pays for my bills, and I don't have to worry about it. Well, I had got to a place where I had said to myself, I don't want a man to pay for anything else for me. I want to be able to do it on my own. So the utilities got turned off. I was living in the projects with my son. I have a drug addiction. And I said to God, I said, Lord, I'm so far away from you, but if you'll help me this time, I will do what you ask me to do. And I was able to get my utilities turned back on. We lived there probably for almost 2 weeks without water or lights or heat or anything. Got the utilities back on, and I'd love to say that was my journey to God, right? That was my path to wholeness, but it wasn't. I still had that addiction. I met my husband. He moved me and my son to Kansas City, and his family had very, very much people of faith. As I began to interact with them more, one of his uncles invited me to church on a Wednesday night. Well, by this time, I'm so addicted that I'm getting high in the morning, I'm getting high on my lunch break, I'm getting high after work. So to go to a Wednesday night Bible study, I'm already high. And I thought, should I really go to the house of God in this condition? I was really conflicted about it, but I knew in my spirit that I was at a pivot. I knew that if I didn't go that particular night in that particular condition, it was going to be so much harder for me to break free from this. Now, mind you, I'm still dealing with all of the brokenness that I've dealt with or haven't dealt with for my entire childhood. So I said, okay, I'll go. Come pick me up. So we get to church, and this is the Wednesday night that pastor says, we're going to pray in groups of 2 or 3. And you're going to tell them what you need from God, and we're going to pray, and God's going to answer your prayer. So I'm like, oh no, I'm high. I can't do this. This is not no, God, no. But God was after me. So I got in my group, and I think somebody in my group had, they wanted a promotion on their job, right? This is all like surface stuff. Somebody else, their dog was dying. I remember that. And I was the last person in my group. And I don't even remember what the person in front of me said because I'm nervous. I know it's now or never. This is my pivot. So it got around to me, and I heard the voice of God said, say it now. Say it. What do you want to be free from? And I said, I have a drug problem, and I want to be free from my addiction. And immediately they just kind of swarmed me, and we prayed, and they were certainly there to offer resources afterwards. But I knew that I had made a step in the right direction. So from that day, and that's been 19 years, I have been free from drugs. I never went back. I never had to refight that all over again. And God delivered me right in that Wednesday night Bible study. So from there, I'm thinking I'm good, right? I'm going to church on a regular basis. I'm free from drugs. I'm married, so I'm not in sex sin. I'm doing all of the things the right way. But I was still broken on the inside. It was a pain that I could not quench, no matter what I did, no matter how many times I prayed at the altar, no matter how many good church services I went to. I would be good till Monday, Tuesday, and then I would be right back in that cycle of hurt all over again. I remember one night I was at my house and I was praying, and I said, Lord, I really, really want to forgive my abuser, because I really felt like if I could forgive him, I'm good. This is the reason why I'm really hurting. And God said, no, what you need to do is you need to forgive your dad. And I was like, I'm not dealing with that. That's so deep. It's too deep. It's too much. I hadn't talked to my dad in years. And he said, you need to forgive your father. You want to be free from this hurt that you have with your abuser? Then you need to forgive your dad, because that's where you broke. That was the breaking point in your life. And everything else is just splinters. And I got into worship. And for the first time, I trusted God to lead me during my prayer. So I wasn't in there trying to navigate which way we're going to go, God, or let's pray this way. I really fully trusted him. And he led me to some dark places. He led me to places that I had kept secret about the pain that I had with my dad, and even the pain that I experienced with my mom. He led me to those places, and he was like, deal with it. Here it is. I'm not going to let you go until you get on your face and you really deal with this. And so that was the start of my journey to wholeness, that worship experience right in my home. And then I knew that the more God would tell me to do, even in the natural, things that he would say to me, you need to do this. You need to write this down. You need to do this type of an exercise so that you can really get this out of you. You got to purge this out. You got to get it out because you've been holding it in for so long. And I was able to forgive my dad. I was able to reconcile with my dad. I was able to look at him in his face and say, I forgive you if you never say that you're sorry. I really experienced freedom and wholeness in a level that I never thought was imaginable. So years passed, and I said to myself, I really want to kind of document, what happened. Because if I felt like this, who else is feeling like this? Who else is in a spot of life where they want to be free, they want to be whole, they're doing all of the things that we're supposed to do, even as believers, but they're still missing something. There's still something that they're not touching. And so I said, I'm going to write a book about my family's divorce. And here's going to be my indicator. If my parents, who have not spoken to each other in 31 years, both separately agree that I could do this book, then I'm going to write it. So I sent my mom a manuscript and I sent my dad a manuscript. Now my mom lives in Kentucky and my dad lives in Virginia. Never the two will cross. My mom said, do it. My dad said, do it now. I knew this was God. And so I started writing. It took me 2 years. I set a date. I said, I want to have this book done by the time I'm 40. And on August 5th, 2014, I published Fixing Broken. And I knew that part of the book was going to be about my process of healing, but I also wanted it to be something that someone else could process their own healing. So at the end of each chapter, there are exercises for the reader. And so the same things that God took me through are the same types of exercises that the reader can experience. And what I have found as God has opened doors for me to share my testimony, and even just like this opportunity, I know that people are hurting. I know that people are in situations that they really want to get out of. And I would say to them, go back to that first break in your life. Whatever it was, whoever did it, however it happened, whether you were a young adult, whether you were a child, whether you were fully grown, you have to deal with it. When you don't deal with the first break, your life is forever broken. And so Fixing Broken is available on my website. And my website is www.kiramcconico.com. And my prayer for everyone who may be listening to my story is that you don't walk around being broken. You are worthy of wholeness, and God is the healer.